I'm very excited to introduce Gene Stone. Gene graduated from Stanford and earned his master's in English literature from Harvard. Since then, he's been a book, magazine, and newspaper editor, as well as an author of over 40 books himself. Some of his previous works include The Bush Survival Bible, a Washington Post #1 bestseller, and The Secrets of People Who Never Get Sick, which has been translated into over 30 languages. In his new book, The Trump Survival Guide, he tackles the question, what can any of us do to make a difference in the face of a Trump administration? Gene not only gives you concrete actions, but he also carefully outlines the issues that are at stake. Gene's new book is already garnering widespread acclaim. Newsweek wrote, though the book includes specific ways to attack every issue, joining your local school board to help with education, reporting hate crimes when you see them to help with civil rights, there are broader, universally applicable ways to fight Trump's agenda. Kirkus Reviews also wrote a comprehensive resource guide for individuals worried that certain rights may be in jeopardy, offering the encouragement to actively fight back with as much knowledge and authority as possible. And if I can include a really quick plug, I think that really honestly, I've read the book. I think it's really for everyone. If you're looking to get involved, if you're very experienced at it, if you just want some additional information, I really think it appeals to a lot of people and everyone could benefit from it. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Gene Stone.
Okay, so thank you. You can hear me? By the way, I don't normally speak to this many people in a bookstore. Usually bookstores attract 3 people or 6 people. And, I mean, this is really amazing, and this is a fabulous bookstore. You guys may not even know how lucky you are. In New York City, we don't even have a store like this. We just have Barnes and Nobles and then, Amazon. But normally what I like to do is encourage as much chatting as possible, because I like to think of this as like it's Trump times and we need to talk to each other, and the whole point of the book is to talk to each other. So I know there's a little formal because you've got microphones you actually have to get up and stand next to and then talk into. But really, if at any point there's anything you want to talk about, please do. Part of the point of the book is that we're all trying to move past our comfort zones. I don't like doing this. My career mostly is as a ghostwriter. So what I normally do is try to find people who like to do this, and then I write their book, and then they do this. I don't do this, but I'm doing this because I am stepping out of my comfort zone. My friends are going, I can't believe you're doing this. You don't ever do this. So I want you to step out of your comfort zones too. So if at any point you really want to just chat about something and talk, please go to a microphone and talk. Just don't talk to each other so I can't hear. So the first thing I just want to talk about is why this book happened. And by the way, if I go like this, can you still hear me? Or do I have to keep going like this? I hate that. All right. I'm a pacer. Even when I'm writing, I pace. So this is not going to be easy, so I'll just hold on. So what happened is, like many people, was following the election very closely. Like many people, I thought, well, Hillary is going to win. And I had that nagging doubt, though, and I hope I don't tread on anyone's toes here. I can't look at you people and talk in the microphone, so I'm not ignoring you. Or you people. But I'm going to talk to you people. I was feeling really, like, I don't know about this Hillary Clinton campaign. I don't know how this is going. And so I'd written this book, The Bush Survival Bible, in 2004, because at that point I really was convinced that Bush was going to win. So that time I had the book already in my mind. Bush won. I went to a publisher. I said, I've got a book for you. Will you publish it? And they said, okay. And they did. And it was a big bestseller. It sold something like 150,000 copies before Christmas, and then dropped off the map because it turned out to be everybody's Christmas present that year. This time, it was a little different because, like a lot of people, I got really, really depressed. I mean, seriously depressed. I'm talking to you too, and to you. And I didn't know what to do, and I spent a week just being miserable. In fact, I wouldn't even look at the newspaper. I wouldn't look at to listen to the radio, and I certainly wouldn't watch TV. It was just horrible. I mean, I'm assuming a lot of you probably felt the same way, So it was bad. But then, after about a week, I thought, well, I could spend the rest of my life just doing this, which sort of had an appeal. But I decided instead that, most of us have one or two talents. I can bark like a dog. It's an amazing thing, and people don't believe me, and I would do it here, but it would scare you. And I can write really fast. I've always been a very fast writer. So I didn't think barking like a dog was probably going to help the cause. But I did think that writing a book would be the appropriate thing to do. And I will say, immodestly, that I knew I could write a book in 12 days. I've done it before. I wrote a book called Forks Over Knives in 2 weeks. That was a bestseller. The Bush book took me about a week. So I had experience, and I knew that even if I'm not the deepest or the wisest thinker, I'm a very fast thinker. You may not see it now, but it's true. So I decided to do it. I thought, this is something I can do. And also, I had the credibility. Because I'd done it before, I knew I could call a publisher, and they would say, yeah. In fact, I called several publishers, and they all said, yes, if you can write a book in 12 days, we'll do it. I actually picked HarperCollins. Anybody can guess why HarperCollins? Because it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. And I thought, they're going to come after me, and I want the cover of knowing I could say, well, look, Rupert Murdoch, this is Fox. This is, I'm cool. Don't worry about it. So I did, and they got very excited about it. By the way, they owned by Rupert Murdoch, but they are a great publisher. I have nothing but really good things to say about them. They've been terrific. So to do a book like that, basically started November 17th, and the due date for final manuscript was November 29th. And so basically I spent 12 days, I got some friends to help me, and I spent 12 days just really doing nothing but, working as hard as I possibly could. And then at the end of 12 days, the manuscript was done, and I turned it in. And that's when the HarperCollins people were terrific. Normally, I don't know if any of you have ever written a book or you have friends who've written a book. It can take a year. That's your average to go from a manuscript. In this case, we were dealing with a month. So we had to go through copy. The copy editor was amazing. She stayed up all night, 3 nights in a row, getting everything done. My editor was incredible. He worked to get the rest of the house behind the book. Matthew Dodona, really, really good guy. So we got it done, and it came out on January 10th, I think it was. And it's gotten, as you pointed out, it's gotten some good reviews, but it's also gotten some odd reviews. One of my favorite is people post online, obviously. So this is my favorite. I was floored to find that women's rights was the very last chapter, since much of Trump's campaign was won on the backs of his women supporters. It's alphabetical, I was very disappointed to read this book. It discusses a lot of topics, but it feels as though the author wrote it in just a few weeks. This is a good book if you're a snowflake. It is not a good book if you're a real person. I thought I really enjoyed reading this book until I opened the book and read this introduction. Now all anyone can do is wait and see what kind of president Donald John Trump will become. This comes from a Harvard graduate? And then, is this for real? People spending actual money on a book to survive Trump? Get a life, people. The drama's out of control at this point. When did the people in this country become such weak crybabies? And that's what I've been getting a lot of, is a lot of this kind of, well, they hacked my site, actually, and it was out for about 3 or 4 days, and I just get, a lot of hate mail. But it's worth it. Oh, thank you. Oh, please. The way book works is I decided, again, if you're writing a book in 12 days, you really don't have a lot of time. Normally, since I've written a lot of books, the skeleton of the book is actually the most important thing. It's almost like the blueprint of a house. If you get the blueprint right, you can build the house. Still a lot of work, but you know what you're doing. In a case like this, I really only had a day. So what I decided to do was to divide the book up into 12 issues: civil rights, the economy, education, energy, entitlement programs, environment, immigration, LGBTQ issues, national security, Obamacare, political issues, women's issues. See, it was alphabetical. And then the conclusion. And then within each book, what I do is I give a brief history of that particular issue in the country. For instance, for civil rights, we talk about the concept of civil rights, when it first started, the Dred Scott decision, et cetera, et cetera. Then we move on to what Obama did, which has been pointed out is fairly complimentary because I'm a fan of Obama. Then what might Donald Trump do? And the issue here was that since this is all written in November, I didn't really know what Trump would do. But what I tried to do instead was lay out the scenario of the worst possible case. And as many of you probably have figured out, almost everything that we predicted in this book is coming true. For instance, we talk in civil rights about the possibility of Steve Bannon becoming the counsel or the principal advisor, and Jeff Sessions becoming the attorney general, and all of these things have happened. But I think the most important part of the book is what we call what you can do. And here, what we offer is basically a resource guide. For instance, for civil rights, we talk about becoming involved, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, showing up for racial justice, Black Lives Matter, even going to meetup.com and finding some homegrown social justice and civil rights groups, talk about donating to organizations, and actually, in some ways, perhaps most importantly, reporting hate crimes. If you don't report a hate crime, then nobody knows it's a hate crime, and maybe you're part of the hate crime at that point. And then finally, there are books to read in each section. For civil rights, we recommend Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates, covering the hidden assault on our civil rights, From Black Lives Matter to Black Liberation, The New Jim Crow, and Why We Can't Wait by Martin Luther King in a new edition. So, since that time, the book came out, and I've been kind of like bearing a lot of the brunt. A lot of other people have really been stepping up and doing some great things. So I just wanted to talk about a little bit about some of what other people are doing. Because the book's point is that if you want to fight Trump, it's only going to work if you work as a community, if you work with other people. It's very hard for an individual to work. So what we're seeing is a lot of people you might not expect, coming together and forming some kind of resistance units. For instance, this week, my favorite is independent movie theaters across America have decided to screen the film adoption of George Orwell's 1984 to protest President Donald Trump's quick descent into authoritarianisms. The independent theaters say this endeavor encourages theaters to take a stand for our most basic values: freedom of speech, respect for our fellow human beings, and the simple truth there are no such things as alternative facts. On April 4th, at least 90 theaters will show the film because April 4th is the day that Winston Smith, the main character, begins a diary. I assume most of you have either read 1984 or maybe you lived that year. Some of you look like you haven't, but you know. Another great organization that's starting is something called the Weekly Resistance Online. And they say, we provide strategic, urgent actions you can take every week to stand up to Trump and protect our democracy, our values, our friends, and neighbors. This is Weekly Resistance Online, .online. Every week we will announce a new call to action and a new financial action to work on. We also have phone scripts ready on a whole range of issues, so you can use this site to call Congress anytime about whatever is important to you. But I think my favorite new group is, I learned about this from an article in the LA Times. I'm just going to read a few paragraphs. In her 35 years as a therapist, Arlene Drake has never heard so many clients talking about the same issue. Week after week, they complain of panic attacks and insomnia because of President Trump. They're too anxious to concentrate at work. One woman's fear turned into intense physical pain. It's a nightmare, says Drake, who works in West LA. Drake was not trained to reveal her personal beliefs, but now will agree with clients if they say they don't support Trump. Therapists nationwide say they've been overwhelmed by the strong feelings triggered by one of the most divisive figures in modern political history. Some patients who support Trump say they feel isolated because they can't share who they voted for in their workplace or home for fear of being harassed or called xenophobic or misogynistic. So this is a group called citizentherapists.com. And what they've done is come together and tried to get all the therapists who are dealing with apparently more people than they ever thought possible coming in for therapy to deal with the election of Donald Trump. Another really interesting group that's starting is called better/angels.org. And what they're doing is it's a bipartisan network of leaders and organizations whose vision is to reunite America. Our method is to improve our society's approaches to conflict. So what they did in Ohio is they got 21 people, 10 who supported for Trump and 11 who supported Clinton, to come together and talk about the issues involved. And they found that actually there were commonalities. It all sounded too good, actually, for me to believe, but I kept thinking, if I were in a group of people who all supported Trump, what would I do? And I just, if you read this, they're all so incredibly polite. I'm not that polite. I also want to go over, again, what I talk about in the book, in each section, again, it's a resource guide. I'm calling it Code B, because Code B is the mnemonic device I use, so I don't end up like Rick Perry and going, I don't remember the Department of Energy, which he now runs. So in my way of dealing with the possibilities are, C stands for call, because calling is turning out to be an enormously effective way of getting your representative to care. O is for organize, because as the Tea Party learned, it's not enough for individuals to work. If you can get people to come together as groups, you're just that much more effective. D is for donate, because money is really important. So even if you only donate, let's say, $5 to an organization, that's like voting for them. It makes them happy to open the envelope. You've given them $5. And as Bernie Sanders proved, if you can actually get that many people to contribute small amounts, you're not only making a lot of money, you end up making headlines. E is for educate, because one of the things we're noticing is that people do not seem to be very well educated when it comes to politics in this country. And again, my favorite story here is the guy in Kentucky who was on the news about 2 weeks ago. And he's a Trump supporter. He's talking about how he really didn't care for Obamacare because he didn't have to worry about it because he was covered by the Affordable Care Act. You know? That person needs some education. So if you think you have something to share with other people, find people you can educate, you know, whether it's going to a senior citizen's home or going to a school, it doesn't really matter. Anything that you can do to contribute is going to help. And the B stands for boycott. And this is something that's been pretty interesting. I don't know if you've been following, I think the woman, I think I have it here somewhere. The woman who started Grab Your Wallet. Do you know about Grab Your Wallet? Yeah, she's doing an amazing thing. And this is a woman who she started out just with a tweet. And from that one tweet, she has managed to start an organization that has basically taken down some surprising places, particularly when it comes to getting people to stop stop running any of Ivanka Trump's stuff. But the one thing you have to, boycotts have been enormously successful. Rosa Parks boycott in 1955 with the Montgomery bus. Apartheid boycotts were enormously successful. There were boycotts in the 90s against Nike that were also terrific. The issue is that you can't boycott everything or you won't buy anything anymore. So you really have to be very, very careful about what you're boycotting. There are places you can go online. There's Grab Your Wallet, any number of other places. But the idea is that it isn't enough to vote every 4 years. Most people don't even vote every 2 years. Basically, I believe we're now at a time where we're voting every day. Everything you do now is basically a vote because we're in perilous times. So think about something you can do every single day. Now, I know people actually have jobs. They're not like me and writers. If you know writers, we actually don't do anything. You know, it's basically you sit around all day, you play with a cat, you like go to the gym, then maybe you write something in an hour. Most people don't have that much free time, but you do probably have some free time, and this would be a great time to use that free time wisely, effectively, and for a cause that is possibly going to change the direction of the country. So please, please, the whole point of this book is in 2 words, which is simply do something. Just please, please, I implore you, just do something. Thank you. And please, please ask a question.
You may be aware that we have an unusual situation here in D.C. where we really don't have a vote in Congress.
Right.
So we have a particular situation. We can call all we want. We can call to probably our home state, which may very well be different than D.C. Kentucky, myself, thank you for that little joke. Iowa is my husband. So we can call, but they really won't respect us because we don't have a vote in that state. So what do you suggest the people in D.C. do in terms of trying to move Congress?
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
a great question, and I've never gotten it before because I've never talked in D.C. before. Normally, you really can go to your local representative's office. You guys can't do that. So what I think you really need to do is find partnerships. If you have the time and you have the intelligence and you want to do something, there are so many people out in the rest of the country who could use your help. The odds are people in D.C. tend to be a little smarter about politics. They know a little bit more. They're maybe more informed. They read it more. So if you could reach out, what would be even better is if you started an organization which was D.C. people reaching out to people in Kentucky. Think about going a step beyond where you would normally go. Try to think, okay, I have a really good idea. I'm going to make this happen. I'm really going to do it. I mean, and again, I don't have that many things I could do. That's what I did. I mean, you know, I knew I could write this book, and even though I didn't want to, and by the way, I still don't want to. You know, the idea that I now have to spend all my time reading about Trump and looking into what he's doing, this is not my idea of fun, but I really feel I have to do this. If you could go in the same direction, if you could say, okay, we don't have much of a say in D.C., but I know there are people out there who could use our expertise. We're going to find those people, and we're going to help them organize, and we're going to teach them about D.C. in a way that they never dreamed possible. You'd be doing an amazing thing.
I have the same dilemma as a lot of us do, and I've been approaching it the way she does. I'm from Maine, and been...
You can vote in Maine.
Yeah, but I live in D.C. As she said. But I'm pretending a bit that I live in Maine. I do still go back there in the summer. But all these things say it's better to call, and I would rather email, frankly, as put out my arguments. The New Yorker this week has...
I got it right here. I was going to read some of it. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, an article that says they're equally effective. And since I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years, I'd probably say equally ineffective. But
Right.
I wonder your thoughts, though, on these different approaches. Do you agree with the New Yorker or with Indivisible?
Well, that's great, and I'm glad you brought this up because I clipped it this week, and this is a long article by Catherine Schultz, but in the middle of it, she talks about the fact that direct effects of this new activism are already apparent, and she starts talking about how Jason Chaffetz, the guy from Utah, introduced a proposal to sell off 3.3 million acres of federal land, and barely a week later, he withdrew it because of all of the calls that they got. So, yes, I understand it can be ineffective sometimes, it feels like, but it seems, according to this article and what else I've been reading, that calling has become more effective, in part because for the first time, the Democrats and the moderates and the progressives are calling. It used to be just taken for granted that it was the Tea Party because they were organized to call and they knew to call and they knew how to call and they knew what to say. And by the way, one of the things I do in this book is the very end of it, I give a template for how to talk to your representative, because a lot of us would really like just to call them up and say, I hate you. But that's not effective. But there is an effective way to do it. So there is a template for calling in here. So I don't know, was your experience that calls are not effective?
Well, generally, yes. But also, well, first it's hard to get through. You'll never get to
Right.
talk to the member.
No, you have to be very patient and be ready to talk to the lowest member of the staff.
Also, although I don't lie even when I write, but
Oh, you should
I'll
lie.
have to admit that I know I'm just not Donald Trump.
Alternative facts, not lies.
Yeah. So I don't present myself as a main voter, but I feel it's a little more obvious if I have to talk person to person.
I morally, I'm not sure if I think, I understand that you don't want to lie, but presenting yourself as a main voter, knowing that that could get you more attention, is that a lie? Or is it just,
An
I don't know,
alternative fact.
an alternative fact? Yeah. Thank you.
First, I'd like to thank you for having written this book. I mean, it's a book that we need. I sent emails to a couple of hundred friends and told them about your book.
No, thank you. Did everybody hear that?
I mean, that's called spreading the word, if you will. Now, on the title, I would have perhaps called it How to Thump Trump or How to Dump Trump.
I wanted to be more subtle.
Of course, but no, I'm being slightly facetious about that. But I just, next point is tomorrow, Timothy Snyder, who has written a book called On Tyranny. Now, some people may know his book Badlands, and this man, he's a professor at Yale, and he knows 11 Eastern and Central European languages and has written greatly about what occurred in Europe between 1933 and 1945, and he's done this book called On Tyranny, in which he takes from his experience, he makes from his experience 20 points about what he sees happening.
Right.
One of his points in the book, and I commend the book to you, I know they have it here, I think he's speaking at 3 o'clock. One of the points he makes is, have a passport.
Okay.
He's really deeply, deeply concerned about where we are heading. And so it isn't just a new, Democrats versus Republicans. It's, in his view, it's far more extreme.
I think that you bring up a great point. We don't really know at this point where we stand, how bad it's going to be. I do know of that book, and I, too, would recommend it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
One more point.
Okay.
I did a lot of traveling recently in the West. I never see people with, and I'm not wearing one either, with resist buttons or bumper stickers. And I think it would be really good if we got around to wearing something like that. So when you saw somebody at the airport, you could stop and talk to build relationships across this country of people who are so deeply concerned as we are of where things are and where they're heading.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you. Do you guys sell resist buttons?
We sell buttons that are the American Sign Language for love.
Well, that's good enough. Okay.
We got stuff.
Okay, I'm too short to reach this microphone, but you've probably heard about like Richard Spencer getting punched.
Yeah.
And like it's been turned into a meme, sort of. Like if you look up Richard Spencer remix, you can see Richard Spencer getting punched
Punched a
to the
lot.
tune of various hits of Yesterday and Today. And so a lot of people have been saying that like violent protests and violent activism are wrong and ineffective, but it has been effective in like turning Richard Spencer into a joke, like someone who can't be taken seriously. So do you think that violence has a place in the resistance?
Well, again, not everybody agrees on resistance tactics. Back in 1969, I think Haldeman said to Nixon, the protests are getting violent. What do we do? And Nixon said, that's great. We want them to be violent. The point being that in his feeling, the more violent the protests came, the more sympathy for him and his cause. I don't tend to want to help people like Nixon. I don't think violence really does help the cause at all. I know some people disagree. And if I had Richard Spencer in front of me, I'd probably want to punch him too. But Richard Spencer's one thing, but I would worry about protests like the ones in Berkeley against Milo, where they really got too violent, and he was able to use that to his credit, although some people said he actually hired those people himself to create the scene. So you don't even know necessarily who's being violent, who isn't. So it's a good question. Personally, I don't think violence is the answer, but that sounds like a platitude. So I don't know. Just don't be violent. Don't punch anybody.
I'm not that strong, so.
So I had a question about language. We're using a lot of terms like resistance and survival, and I noticed it feels like that being in like a liberal city, and I go to college in a very like liberal college, and I remember the night that Trump was elected, like I could hear people like yelling. But do you feel like these words like resistance, survival isolates a huge part of the country who thinks that we should just get over it?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you create a dialogue with someone who thinks that it's not a big deal if you're literally saying like, this is the end of the world, this is how you survive through this, when like if we all like join a resistance and start branding ourselves in this way, we're isolating a huge portion of the country that actually elected this guy. So I was just wondering like how you balance both this opposition and using the correct language.
That's a great question. And in that Better Angels group I was talking about, that's specifically what they're addressing. What they're trying to do is create a common language for all Americans. The idea being that if the right and the left can't talk to each other, I've actually written a few books on Latin America, and unfortunately what often has happened down there is the right and the left have gotten so disparate that one of them ends up taking over as a dictatorship. We don't want that to happen. We do want to keep communication between the right and left going. On the other hand, it's hard to get away from resistance and fighting and those sorts of words. So what I would say is it's really a situation by situation. I mean, if you're with some people that you know are Trump supporters, you want to be careful. You don't want to call them idiots. If you're with people who think they're idiots already, you don't have to say anything because it's already been done for you. But it's a great question, and the issue of communication between the left and the right is something that I think is going to be much more palpable in the conversations, particularly if Trump runs into more trouble. What's going to happen, for instance, if there's talk of impeachment or he is actually impeached? What are his people going to start thinking? What are they going to do? And what's the language they're going to use? So it's anyone's guess at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm also short, so I hope everyone can hear.
No, I like short people.
Okay. So going back to like calling your representative or even going to, the town halls that they should be hosting, but they're not really. I wanted to get your opinion, or if you're concerned about the fact that a lot of these representatives are not taking our calls or people showing up seriously because they'll look at your phone number and say, oh, this isn't the wrong area code, forgetting the fact that we have cell phones and move and keep the same phone, or that they're saying that the people calling in or showing up to these town halls are like paid protesters that aren't actually calling, so they're not like taking our calls or our opinions seriously when we try to talk to our representatives. So I was wondering if I could get your opinion.
Then it's a conundrum, but the issue is if you don't make the calls, then nobody's calling. So basically, all the things you bring up are real, but you can't stop. You still have to do it and just hope for the best. I have friends who just, if they have a day off, they'll just get on the phone and they'll just dial and dial and dial and dial and dial until they get through. And sometimes they don't get through, but they did something. If everybody feels like, well, they're not going to take my call and it's never going to happen, then it isn't going to happen. So, again, great points. You still have to do it.
Is there a way that you think we could get them to realize that no, we're not actually paid protesters?
No, actually, it seems like that is now a Republican talking point, because they're all now saying, oh, they're getting $1,000 a day. I wish. Or $2,000 would be even better. Maybe get a raise, because I'm a really dangerous one. It's a talking point, and it's not going to go away. As long as there are going to be people protesting, the Republicans who feel uncomfortable with this are going to find ways to say, this isn't real, this isn't the real people. Nothing we can do about it. Thanks.
So in terms of kind of the dialogue we've been having about as citizens of Washington, D.C., we don't have representation or have a voice. A friend of mine put it really well, and she said we can be a physical witness to other frustrated people. So we can go to the White House physically. We can go to the Supreme Court physically. I used to work on the Hill for conservative Republicans. I'm not one anymore.
It's okay. It's okay. Leave her be. Leave her be.
You know, one thing for me is there's a lot of stuff like your survival guide or Indivisible or a lot of other stuff out there that already says how to call Congress or how to deal with that. And so I was like, I have insight for how to talk to you Republican members of Congress. Do I write a piece on Medium and try and get that out there? Or do I just, forward someone else's thing? And kind of what are your thoughts on, there's so much out there now. So
No, there is so much out there. There isn't enough out there. And if you have insight that maybe somebody else could use, please. I mean, what you just said was great. I'd love to hear. Go to the email I'm using is trumpsurvivalguide@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you've got some tips, I would love to be able to pass those on. Even if you don't think you have anything new, still do it. Because if people don't do it, it's what I'm going to say over and over again, and it's what I keep saying over and over again, and I will continue to say over and over again. Do something. And that's something you can do.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for writing the book, first of all, and you've lowered my blood pressure just by talking so calmly about this.
Hibiscus tea.
Okay.
I wrote a book with Dr. Michael Greger, and I learned that hibiscus tea surprisingly does great things for blood pressure. So my voice
So your
and
book
blood
in
pressure.
one hand and the tea in the other. Okay, got it. I wanted to go back to something that we have talked about a little bit and just share an idea that I read about in the Washington Post. So it's not mine, but I'd like to share it. A woman who lives in D.C. or Bethesda maybe, can't talk to anybody. She doesn't have, I guess she must live in D.C. because she doesn't have a senator. So she has a lot of friends around the country, so she texted her friends or emailed them, and she said, send me your letters, and I will physically take your letters to your representative.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and so
Everybody
I
hear that
texted
one?
my friends in Pennsylvania and said, send me your letters, and I will take them to the representative because we physically live here. We can do this. And they will, if you come with 10 letters and you're one person, you're really 11 people.
Right.
And so anyway, that's my suggestion.
That's a great idea. And again, I would love it because I don't have much of a memory. trumpsurvivalguide@gmail.com. If you could send that to me.
Yeah, I'll send you the name of the woman because she's
That'd be
my
terrific.
hero and- okay.
Because I'm going to be doing a podcast with my friend Howard Jacobson. It's going to be about 15 minutes a week. And what we want to do is, there are a lot of political podcasts out there, but our idea is to try to find people in Iowa or in Oregon and all those states that begin with vowels and ask them, what are they doing? What specific points in small communities are they, what's their plan? And it's hard to find those people. So again, if you can remember Trump Survival Guide at Gmail, and you ever run into any of these people or have any suggestions on how to find them, please let me know.
Hi, thanks for coming. So I have to admit, I have not read your book yet.
That's okay. It's okay.
But
You have all tonight to read it.
My assignment for tonight. I just wanted to ask you about particularly the use of the word survival in the title, as like a white, pretty privileged person in DC. I think sometimes it feels like my survival's at risk at this time, and I think from like a mental health perspective that could be plausible for myself and a lot of my friends. But it's also a very different type of survival than like people being deported right now, and being a trans student in school, or all these different types of people that are really facing a very different type of threat than me. And I guess I was just curious so I know from an author's perspective, your survival guide is helpful to all audiences, but
Thank you.
so that can't be your answer. But from your perspective, what type of survival needs is your book helpful for?
Well, I think you actually kind of said it. It's for across the board. And if you happen to be lucky enough to be a wealthy white person living in privilege, but you're suffering anxiety because of Trump, all the way down to an immigrant who is in this country and is terrified that he's going to be deported, I would like to think that this book can help. I would also like to be honest and say that I had 1 hour to come up with a title. And this is the best I could do.
And you had Bush Survival Guide already,
and I
right?
had the Bush right. But that book was called the Bush Survival Bible. And I got so much crap from people. How could you use the word Bible? And of course what I said was, are you aware that the term for a cow's third stomach is Bible? People did. I had to look that up, but not that familiar with cows. Thank you.
The Bible was a pretty big bestseller too, so maybe that was helpful too for the book.
It certainly was.
Jean, thank you so much for being here. I've read many of your books. I'm a big fan, and I want to thank you for writing this book too. It seems very important. I'm looking forward to reading it. My question for you is this. It seems like, so far at least, the Republican Congress, for the most part, has largely not been willing to confront the new administration that much, maybe with the exception of the Treasury, with the Labor nominee, Andy Pudzer, but for the most part, they haven't been. And because it's so close in the Senate, are there specific Senate Republicans who you think are the most vulnerable to perhaps defecting and opposing the administration on some of the key priorities that we've been talking about?
Yeah, I think certainly Susan Collins, Rob Portman, Dean Heller, and Lisa Murkowski. If I were them, I would look around and say, my God, we can control the Senate. If the 4 or 5 of our, theoretically moderate, not as moderate as they used to be, senators, they could have an enormous power. They could be like Kennedy, the Supreme Court, as the fulcrum between what gets passed and what doesn't get passed. And it looks as if Susan Collins is actually already starting to do that. But the Republicans do have this tendency, unlike the Democrats, to stick together and to be a team. So it's not clear whether or not they're actually going to do that. But I think a lot of the, as more stuff comes out about Russia and any other possibly, I don't know what the word is. I want to keep away from. As stuff comes out that could damage the presidency, I think you'll find that more Republicans will start to withdraw. And look, McCain and Graham on foreign affairs are already doing that. And so I think that the weaker Trump gets, the more likely Republicans are to separate themselves. I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a brief plug. I've been to the Quaker Meeting House up on Florida Avenue, and they have excellent programs there regarding fighting racism, how to protest peacefully, etc., and so on. So if anybody's interested, they've got programs going almost every weekend.
Okay, what was that again, please?
The Quaker Meeting House on Florida Avenue.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Right. Curious, have you read the book Strangers in Their Own Land?
Strangers in a Strange Land?
Yeah, in their own land,
Oh,
Strangers in Their Own Land. It's a book written by Berkeley sociologist who went to like deep
No.
south, like Louisiana,
Uh-huh.
who like diehard Trump supporters, and she answers the question: Why is it that the poorest Americans are generally like most hostile to government and government assistance? And the response from the Louisiana people was this: you were in line waiting for an advancement, and there are people who cutting the lines as minorities, like gay and lesbian people, that kind of stuff, and it's called an element of racial resentment that prevents them voting Democratic or becoming like liberal or voting or supporting government. My response to you was like looking. I wish I read the book. It's a very good book. Highly recommend it.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving forward, is there a way the Democrats can perhaps like find common ground with Trump supporters, to perhaps like vote against the Republicans in 2018 and in 2020, presumably he runs for election?
Well, I think that Democrats have to find a way to engage Trump supporters, just as whether you like it or not, the Clinton Democrats found a way to engage the Reagan Democrats and brought them back into the party. The question is how they do that. I don't think anybody knows at this point, but I'd like to think that the Democrats are thinking about how to do that, but it's anyone's guess at this point. But it's a good point.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. Read the book. It's really good.
Strangers in Their Own Land?
Yes.
I don't know it.
Yeah. Just go to Amazon, Google it. It's great. A lot of discussions.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a quick question. In thinking of this situation, which is very difficult, I was talking to a politician in Virginia last night, and he said he has one concern that the most people that are newly involved in light of Trump are saying, this year we're going to take back the Virginia House of Delegates. Very unlikely, though gains can be made, which brings to mind a point that this is a very long-term engagement and struggle, and there are probably going to be 20 to 50 to 100 defeats before we see any substantial victories. How do people maintain their engagement in light of that long slog?
Well, that's a really good question. I don't have the answer. I think it's really a matter of your commitment. If you really feel that this country is worthy of your time and worthy of your effort, and you care about this country, then you keep going. And there will be defeats, and there will be state houses that should have gone Democratic, they'll stay Republican, and Republican governors that should have been voted out of office but haven't been. And it's just a matter of, well, I've been a Philadelphia Philly baseball fan for years. So, sometimes you stick with something even though it's pointless. Because in the long run, they could win the World Series. In the long run, the Democrats could actually do the right thing and win the country back.
I'm going to say the obvious. Boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Senator Sheldon, I guess Sheldon Whitehouse. Yeah, was here 2 nights ago. And one of his comments was that when people show up, and particularly in a large number, notice is very well taken.
Yeah.
There's no getting away from that. And second to your book, or maybe before it, his book is called Captive. It doesn't have anything specific about protesting, except once you read that book, I think you'll become a protester a lot quicker. Finally, my idea out of the blue is this. Every morning you got to do something, is what you say.
Yeah.
Question is getting to the right place at the right time. MoveOn.org plus other places have a roster. I think you've probably mentioned them. I think there's a need for the equivalent of an Uber protest, meaning Uber drivers that are not that, but are people who are self-designated, will pick up other people that want to go to a certain designated spot.
That's another great idea that you could initiate and you could back. So do it.
Can I borrow your car?
I live in New York. I don't have a car. You can borrow his car. Yeah.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm from Bessemer, Alabama, and although I may not look it, I'm 45. And I grew up at a time where my mother actually lied about my address so that I could go to an integrated school. So I moved to this area to kind of avoid the Alabamification of things, and I didn't seem to get away from it. But what I wanted to ask, if you had any suggestions on how do we reach that large number of people who did not vote. I do have lots of conversations with folks who really believe in the current administration, and I find it sometimes difficult to find that common ground. And I think the people who didn't vote, those are the ones that we probably should really spend a lot of time trying to reach. What suggestions, if you have any?
I don't have any specific suggestions. I don't think anybody does at this point. The people that don't vote are the people that we can't reach. So what I would suggest is someone like you work on that. Figure out a plan. Maybe meet with some other people. Maybe people in D.C. who don't vote, go to other states, find people who don't vote and talk to them. I don't know, but that's exactly the sort of organization that we need, and you're the sort of person who should be doing it, even if you don't look 45.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. So one point you mentioned was how Clinton captured the Reagan Democrats after, and the way he did that is kind of using the documentary 13th as kind of my source, was by kind of coming more center.
Right.
Right. So getting harder on crime, 3 strikes and you're out, which kind of led to the mass incarceration issue that we have today. How do we encourage Democrats who kind of want their power back in office to not kind of leave in, right? So if they go center this time, that's kind of taking on maybe some of the same platforms on immigration, some of the same platforms on education. So a lot of these same platforms that will be taken on by members of Trump's cabinet. So how do we maintain what our hopes are, if you're a Democrat or anybody of the party, with kind of the constant fears that if we're going to kind of grab these people in the same way that Clinton did, that there may be a temptation to go more center, farther right, if you will, to capture voters, just to gain a position of power, which may again extend what we don't like about this current administration.
Well, I think you hit the the single most difficult issue facing the Democrats is they're all over the place, and I would assume that probably some people here are, if they're mostly Democrats, are moderate ones, and some people are progressive ones. And I mean, I've been called a faux-gressive because I've been accused of not being progressive enough. I think, again, just as I've been talking about, there needs to be a dialogue between the right and the left. I think within the Democratic Party, there needs to be a discussion between the Democratic right and left, and a willingness to compromise. The far left is never going to get everything it wants, and the Democratic centrists aren't going to get what they want. So unlike the Republicans, who, like it or not, they do seem to be able to come together when they need to, Democrats don't. And so what I would encourage people to do is to, if you are a Democrat and you are represented, well, you're in D.C., so you're not, but somebody else could write their representative and say, look, what's most important isn't necessarily you're being right on every issue. It's you're finding a way to get the issues we care about covered and passed, but we don't expect you to win every battle. And unfortunately, that's kind of the attitude right now, and that's going to have to change.
So before opening up for the book signing, I just want to make one quick comment about don't forget the importance of local activism. I'm also a DC resident. I completely understand the frustration of not having representation. And some of the most rewarding experiences that I've had is going to my city council, going to the mayor's office, talking to all those people, because all these national issues do have real world, obviously, impact on the local level where we all do have a voice. And honestly, I wrote out to one of my representatives on the city council. I got a response back in 5 minutes. I was totally floored. It was in the middle of the holiday season. I thought, this is just, like, oh, I'm out of the office until after. And no, they're like, great, we want to meet with you. So just the importance, even if you're here in D.C. or even when you go back home, the importance of just local activism. So,
can I just, one last thing. I just want to read the last paragraph of the book, because it's something I feel really strongly about. More than working on an issue that concerns you, more than joining a demonstration, and more than signing a petition, perhaps the best way to fight to keep this country a land of dignity and freedom is to show civility and support to all Americans, whatever their gender, race, creed, or color. When you buy your morning coffee from the Afghan man at the counter, when you talk to the Puerto Rican woman who lives next door, or when you consult with your Estonian lawyer, or when you work with your South African accountant, Tell them how much you appreciate what they do and how glad you are that they live here. Appoint yourself the ambassador for the America that you believe in. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming out.